For the first time in a long time, Mineral Wells go back to the playoffs. Hello, everybody. Terry Bennett here on the Jack Powell Ford Mineral Wells football show. I'm sorry, playoff football show right here on L4 Media as the Rams have a tough one tonight against a Glen Rose Tiger team that's way better than their 5-5 record. This game is 7 p.m. Thursday at Stephenville's Art Briles Stadium. Wonderful facility. Went up there with my co-host of Sideline to Sideline and watched Stephenville play La Vega in non-district. And that place is a palace, but it's not gaudy. Like some of these high school stadiums, Allen and such, are a little gaudy. They're not bad, but they're just a little gaudy. Just saying that. Stephenville's isn't. It's a really nice stadium, but it fits what they need for football. But anyway, the point is, back to back, man. Like me and Coach Worrell, we tried to figure it out. Neither of us even know when the last time Mineral Wells has went back to back. And it's so impressive because the season the Rams had this year with injuries, it had been really easy to pack it up early in district play, and they didn't. And in fact, as Coach will say, and I agree, I think they're playing the best football they've played all year over the last game and a half. There was something about that Eagle Mountain second half. A switch was flipped or something. From that point on, man, Mineral Wells has just been absolutely on fire last week, dominating Burke Burnett. But this is going to be a tough matchup. Yes, Glen Rose is 5-5, but when you go look at their record and you see who they're 5-5 against, you then understand why they're 5-5. They legitimately have one of the toughest for a Division II schedules. They began the year 0-5 actually, and they've won 5 in a row since then. Their losses were by 14 to Grandview. They got beat pretty bad by Gatesville by 23 points. I'll say this though: the Hornets are a team. They have Sealy this week, and Sealy for the longest time was one of the big prohibitive favorites. But Gatesville is good enough when they're playing well to beat a Sealy team, but then they'll struggle against the Waco Conley team like they did last week when they were out of the play, even though they were out of the playoffs. Then Glen Rose lost to Brownwood by 7, by 1 to Robinson, and by 5 to Alvarado. The issue with Glen Rose is when they play good offenses, they tend to give up points. And I think that's where Mineral Wells will have to make their hay today. I don't think the Rams tonight can win a defensive game unless it's just a lot of ugly turnovers. It's going to have to be a high-scoring game, in my opinion. And Coach Worrell will talk about that here in a minute. We want to thank our sponsor, and that's Jack Powell Ford. Find them online at jackpowellford.com. Visit them in person, 1418 Southeast 1st Street, right there in Mineral Wells. Of course, as I've been saying all year, you want to go find a car, you don't even have to go there. You can just look online at jackpowellford.com. Get your car that you want. Get financed. If you have a service or parts issue, you can go online or you can call them 940-654-2714. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, it's the head coach of the Rams, Coach Cody Worrell, right here on the Jack Powell Ford Mineral Wells playoff football show on L4 Media. Here at L4 Media, we talk high school football, 4A, 3A, and 2A in Texas. We talk East Texas sports. We talk NFL, guy talk, movie, and booze. We also talk wrestling and so much more. And you can see it all on our YouTube channel at L4 Media Company. Like and subscribe. Terry Bennett back here on the Mineral Wells playoff football show, now joined by the head coach of the Rams, Coach Cody Worrell. And, Coach, before we talk about the playoffs, well, let's be honest, last week was a playoff game for you as well, and y'all survived an impressive 63-7 win versus Burke Burnett. This kind of feels like this was maybe the most complete game y'all played this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, our kids came out. They had a great week of practice. Senior night, I knew that they'd be probably a little bit more extra motivated. Man, we jumped on them quick. We really did, and played a really, really solid football game, and I was super happy and proud of the way our kids played.
We talked a little bit about this last week in the run-up to that game, but for this program, what does it mean to have back-to-back playoff years? Because that has not happened a lot in Mineral Wells Ram football history.
Yeah, no, it's something we talked about after the game. Congratulated those seniors on their on that accomplishment, because it hasn't happened here in a while. I couldn't tell you when the last time, but it hadn't happened here in a while, and it's a lot of momentum going forward. And especially in the year where man, there's just so many ups and downs this year. Playing a great first game, and then man, God, really started with scrimmages, catching injury bugs during the scrimmages, and then catching the injury bug those first, felt like 6 weeks of the season, and man, just the way that our group has rallied and overcame all the injuries and playing really good football right now.
I was actually going to say, I know this year you're 4-6, and last year you're 7-4. But in my opinion, with all the injuries, as you said, the ups and downs, this is a more impressive playoff spot. And I know it was a loss, and I know y'all were down early, but there was something about that Eagle Mountain game I was watching, and it just felt like something had changed in that second half with your team.
Yeah, I keep kind of going back to that game and man, those kids just the way that they fought, especially in the second half of that football game, it's almost like week 9 of the season. We just kind of got in a groove in the second half, and second half of week 9 game, and it carried over to last week's game, and hopefully it'll carry over to tomorrow night. But no, you're exactly right. I kind of felt like, especially offensively, found our groove, and defensively as well. I know that they scored. We talked about it last week. Eagle Mountain ended up scoring, 35 points, and one of those was a kickoff return, and we felt like two of those touchdowns, were short fields, and I was pretty pleased with the way our defense, played. Hasn't really played the past 2 weeks, and so they're going to have to play really, really good tomorrow night to give us a chance. And same thing offensively, we have to play, our best game of the football season, best game of the year tomorrow night to have a chance of beating those guys.
All right, let's talk about Glen Rose. I know it's cliche, but their record is not indicative of who they are. They had, I contend, one of the toughest 4A division or 4A Division two schedules in the non-district. They're 5-5, but the tape says they're much better than that.
Much, much better than a 5-5 team. Their non-district schedule was brutal. They started off 0-5. In those last couple of games in non-district against really, really good football teams, they had really good chances to win. They were within, a score, a field goal, whatever the case is, man. And they've been battle tested, and then they got into district play and just rolled through district. And man, they do a really good job. And I'm sure you're going to talk about this, but it all starts with their quarterback. Their quarterback he's their guy. He was their starting running back last year as a freshman. He's a sophomore this year, and he can run it, he can throw it. They've got really good receivers. They're really sound. Coach, Cliff Watkins I've known him for a long time. Never played against him. Known him for a long time, and I consider him a really good friend of mine. And he does a really good job. And I've always known how good of a coach Cliff was, and even going into this year, years past, for whatever reason, man, Coach Watkins, man, he has those guys playing their best football the best time of the year, about right now. And nothing's changed going into this year. They seem to be playing their best football coming into the week 11 of the season, or I'm sorry, first week 12 of the season, and nothing's really changed on that.
That's a great point. And I think that's one of the underrated skills that the good coaches do, where year in and year out, when it's time to win or go home, that's when you're playing your best ball. And again, pointing back to you this year, and a lot of that's injuries, but you can say right now are playing y'all's best ball as well.
Yes, yeah, no, and a big reason for that is getting 100% healthy, and that definitely has perked me up a little bit the past 2 weeks. Is that we feel like that we're finally 100% for the first time all season. So, going into this game, it's going to take everybody to do their part, and from the coaches to players to everybody to have a chance to win this game.
And one of the very underrated parts of the playoffs is the extra practices. How important is that for you as a program, with not only your starters, but your younger guys getting the extra week, hopefully 2 or 3 weeks in playoff practices?
Yeah, no, they've came out this week, and our freshmen they get after it. If we're doing offense on one end, they're on the other side of the field, and they're playing games and getting extra snaps, and a lot of those guys have been moved up to run scout team this week, and so it's been good. It's been good to get another practice that, people don't understand how important that is. Just getting in the playoffs and letting your younger kids get an extra week of practice, or, hopefully 2 or 3, however long you can play, that's more practice reps that they're getting that other teams aren't.
Once again, I want to thank Coach War for joining us here on the show, the Jack Powell Ford Mineral Wells Playoff Football Show. This is one of the best 4A playoff games in the week, in my opinion. I think Glen Rose and Mineral Wells are very evenly matched. And as we talked about at the beginning, and as Coach Worrell talked about, this is probably going to be an offensive game. Now, it's saying that offensive games usually get turned by a turnover or two or a big stand at a key moment. So I'm not saying the defense won't play a part, but I just really have a feeling this feels like a 45-38 type of game. And if so, that's going to be a blast. And also for Mineral Wells, once again, crossing that threshold of back-to-back playoffs, that's so big. Not only do you get at least one extra week of practice, but you start to lay that foundation of a playoff run expectation every year. And that's what the good programs do. Now, if they do get eliminated, we will have a final show, but it will not be until after the playoffs are over. I usually put those up the week after Christmas, kind of just do a little bit of a football recap of 2025. So, it'll be up then. Of course, if they win, we'll be back next week. So, hey, why don't we just plan on being back next week right here on the Jack Powell Ford Mineral Wells Football Show. I'm sorry, Playoff Football Show on L4 Media.